Hey guys, I'm doing a video today instead of a live Zoom because Mrs. Hanley and I have to do some things while I would normally have class, so I'm recording this video instead. So without further ado, we talked last time about, and you can see this is your book right here. These are your notes that you have. We talked a bit about Washington's first term as president. We discussed that he had many precedents that he set, that he started, which were kind of traditions or things like that. We talked about the first Congress, his 4 people that were in his cabinet, which can be found right here. Cabinet was a group of advisors. We also discussed the Judiciary Act of 1789, which established federal court system. And John Jay was selected to be the first Supreme Court Justice. We discussed that. And we discussed what the Bill of Rights were. The Bill of Rights was the first 10 amendments. Some of you had more than 10 on your homework, but they were the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. There are now 27 of them, but there were 10 that are considered the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights limited the power of government and established what rights people had, basic human rights that we had. So let's go on to financial problems. Let's discuss what the financial problems that they had. The financial problems, the financial crisis was the biggest thing that Washington had to deal with in his first term. That was the biggest issue that he had. You know, each president has different issues that they deal with during their term. Like in Trump's term, the past 4 years, probably the biggest issue that he dealt with is coronavirus, right? George Bush in his term as president, one of the biggest issues he dealt with was 9/11, you know, the terrorist attack. Biggest issue that George Washington dealt with was the financial crisis. There was a national debt. Here's the word national debt here. What the national debt was is the amount of money that the whole government owed, and that was growing and growing and growing. So they owed a lot of money because of the American Revolution, and it was a big crisis to try to figure out how are they going to pay it back. Well, Alexander Hamilton was the Secretary of the Treasury. We discussed that he was the Secretary of the Treasury the first time, which meant he dealt with financial issues. He was, you know, spotlight was on him to try to figure out what he could do, and he had a plan. So his plan focused on one of three, on doing 3 things. I don't know if this even talks about here, but it doesn't go into details, but I'll tell you what 3 things they had to do. Hamilton said he wanted to form a national bank. Okay, so a national bank that would be a federal bank, not just individual town banks, but a national bank. He wanted to raise tariffs. If you guys remember what tariffs are, and we're going to talk about this chapter later on, but tariffs are tariffs are taxes on imports, kind of like duties. And then he also wanted to absorb all the debts of the original of all the different states. So that was his plan, was to I'm just trying to see if I want to skip anything. Yeah, that's good enough. So he wanted those 3 things. You can put that under number 34, that he wanted to start a national bank. He wanted to increase tariffs on imported stuff. I can go into that a little bit more. What you do with a tariff is what it would be. Let's say we wanted to buy oranges. Okay, you can either buy them from Florida or you can buy them from, I don't know, you can buy them from Africa or whatever. A tariff would be for the African oranges. You have to pay an additional. It costs like $1.50 for every orange, but only $1 for the American oranges. The idea with a tariff is that it incentivizes people buying stuff right from America. If they want the African orange instead of the American orange, they're going to have to pay extra for it. And a lot of people would be like, I'd just rather take the cheaper one. I'll just take the American one, which helps American business. That's the point of a tariff. And he also, as I mentioned, wanted to absorb all of the debts of all the individual states. Well, not everybody was for this. Some people did not like the idea of the federal government getting involved in the national debt crisis, because it meant the government was kind of sticking its nose in places it didn't really need to be. But but he had a plan. It says Hamilton's plan to pay off the debts to American citizens unleashed a strong protest. Okay, let's talk about bonds. When the government had borrowed money during the American Revolution, it had issued bonds. What a bond is, as it says, a paper notes promising to repay the money in a certain amount of time. Well, in other words, what a bond is you can buy a bond that will mature at a later time, and you'll be able to get more money for it. Like, let's say I buy a $10 bond right now, and I basically, what that means is I give the government $10, and they give me a little note, a little certificate. And after a certain amount of time, whether it's 5 years or 10 years or 50 years or 100 years, I can turn that certificate in and get more money from it. Like, I paid $10 for that certificate, but then I turn it in after 10 years, and instead of $10, it's $50, you know? And so it's not usually a huge amount of money more, but I can use that to make more money. You know, I turn it in, and then I get more money back from it. And so it had issued a lot of bonds. The government had issued bonds during the American Revolution, and people had these bonds sitting around. And so a lot of the people were poor and needed money. So instead of waiting for the full amount of time to pass, a lot of them, like, again, let's say it's a $10 bond, and if you wait the full amount of time, you get $50 back. This $10 bond, a lot of these poor people who had these bonds would turn it in, and instead of waiting to turn it in until the end, they would sell that certificate to somebody else for a lesser amount of money. Like these speculators here, these speculators. We talked about land speculators before. A speculator is a person who risks a certain amount of money in order to make a larger profit. So the speculators would buy the bonds off of these people. Like, the people would have a $10 bond, they'd sell it to the speculator for $20, and the speculator would hang on to that $20 to hang on to that certificate until it matures all the way, and then turn it in for the $50. You guys see what it is? A speculator, it's kind of like an investor. They will risk a little bit of their money in order to make more money later. So they'd risk giving somebody who paid $10 for that bond certificate, they'd pay them $20, and then they would get the bond certificate, and they would wait until it matures all the way and then turn it in for the full amount of money. Well, the people who opposed Hamilton's plan said, it doesn't matter, you want to forgive all these debts and everything and just basically make the bonds mature right away. And they said it doesn't help them, because most of the poor people that had bonds already gave them up to speculators anyway, because they needed the money already. So all you're doing is helping the speculators, and who cares about helping the speculators? They already have money. And so those are the people that, the feelings about that. And the original bond owners who had just sold their bond certificate for money now, when they heard, oh, we're gonna cause those to mature right away, and we're gonna give you the money for them, they felt betrayed. They felt like, oh man, if I just hung on to it, and we had lost money, because they might not even sold it for $10. A $10 bond selling for $20. Maybe they took a $10 bond and sold it for $8 or $5 just to get some amount of money, and they felt betrayed. Oh, are you kidding me? Are you telling me that if I just hung on to it, I could have had my full amount of money? And so they didn't like it. The original bond owners didn't like it. But also the southern states, a lot of southern states did not like it, because states like Virginia had already paid off their debt. Virginia was all set. They didn't have any debt left. A state like Massachusetts still had a lot of debt from the American Revolution. Virginia had already paid its debt. So when Alexander Hamilton was like, hey, let's have the federal government absorb all of this debt, and we'll kind of take it out with taxes, the Virginians and stuff like that were like, wait, we already took care of ours. You telling me that I have to now help the other person? It's almost like if you have, if you are at your desk area, and you have your desk area, and you have a mess all over your desk area, and other people have a mess all over their desk areas, and I say, okay, time to clean up, and you go and you diligently clean up, and you clean everything up, and I say, okay, hey, I noticed you Rebecca, you cleaned up your whole desk area, and Gabriel Antonio, he hasn't touched his desk yet. I want you, Rebecca, to go help Gabriel clean up his desk. You would, and you would likely, and you'd have a point of saying it, being like, I already cleaned my desk area. Why should I have to help him clean when I did what I was supposed to do, and he hasn't done what he was supposed to do? Why should I help him? And so that's what a lot of people felt. So that was the opposition to his plan. And so there was a lot of back and forth going on, back and forth. But the where compromise was so you had the start of what we're going to see a couple political parties going to end up forming. But a guy like Alexander Hamilton on one side wanted the big government with a large financial plan and everything, and then you had other guys who did not like the big government, guys like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, both Virginians. Remember, Virginia paid off its debt. They're both Virginians. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, they did not like this financial plan. But they met in private. Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison, they met in private to discuss it, and they ended up coming up with a deal. Their deal was that Hamilton would agree to back the nation's capital being in Virginia if Thomas Jefferson and James Madison backed his financial plan with the National Bank. And so that was the deal that was struck. They finally all agreed to do that. Jefferson and Madison agreed to back Hamilton's financial plan, even though they hated it, and Alexander Hamilton agreed to back the capital being in Virginia, which he really didn't care that much about anyway. And so the capital being in Virginia, you can see it ends up being Washington, D.C. Is that one of your words? Bond speculators. Yeah, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is the nation's capital, and it was on the banks of the Potomac River. The reason why it was on the banks of the Potomac River is George Washington, once Virginia was given the right to have the capital be in Virginia, Jefferson was like, "Hey, George Washington, where do you think the capital should be?" And he was like, "Right here on the Potomac River." Why? Well, Mount Vernon was right there. So if he had to go to Washington, if he had to go to the capital, he could just kind of go back and forth. It's like almost like, it's a great place. My next door neighbor, they can be that's where the capital should be, so I don't have to travel hundreds of miles. He basically had it right near him. And so that is where we will stop for today. We're almost done. We have a little bit left but I don't think I can only have 15 minutes for these videos, so that's where I'll stop for today. And you will have homework. Remember to check LMS for homework. All right, bye.